My name is Katie Groves, and this is part 32 in my series about deprogramming from trauma-based mind control. If you have not done so already, I ask that you please watch the first two parts of this series, linked in the description below, for disclaimers and safety measures you can take while watching these videos. In this video, I'm going to be talking about fog programming. Fog programming is a program that, for me, looks like forcibly induced trance states, drug states similar to benzodiazepines or opiates, and general feelings of fogginess and hypnosis that prevent parts from thinking critically. It's something that has been activated for me externally by programmers, but also most often comes up for me now in the context of my deprogramming process, when parts internally try to undo programs and are then attacked by sabotage programmers inside. And so that is the context from which I will be speaking about it in this video, because this is to accompany my video about preventing reaccessing and types of programs that can sabotage the deprogramming process. So, like I said, it comes up in the context of deprogramming. And what it looks like inside is parts of my system will try to go in to deprogram a program, and then they will get attacked by an inner team of sabotagers that specifically target the parts that can think most critically, that pose the biggest threat to the program. These are the parts that are most capable of working with the alters in the programmed system. And I do want to say that this doesn't come up for me as much anymore, as I've gotten really skilled at de-booby-trapping systems and blocking parts from infiltrating and sabotaging once I start deprogramming. But for me in the beginning, I was constantly getting attacked with the fog programs. Parts would literally throw eidetic images of fog bombs, of smoke bombs, at parts and fog over their world. And this would debilitate them if not dealt with properly, and prevent them from furthering the deprogramming work in the system they were in. And then what typically would happen was the sabotage programmers would give the parts we're attempting to deprogram, they would give those parts, the ones who are still programmed, over to inner programmers who would then reinforce their programs, erase any memories that they had of being accessed by the deprogrammer parts, and make it harder for them to get accessed again by the deprogrammers. So it was very scary because we had a bunch of parts working in teams that were there to undermine our deprogramming process. But one of the things that has helped us most with this is to not be afraid of the parts of ourself that were there to undo our deprogramming and prevent it. We had to see these parts as frightened children, not as perpetrators. And we had to treat them with compassion and love. Because all of these parts are parts of ourself and want the same things we do. They want to be accepted and loved. They want to be safe. And oftentimes, these inner sabotager systems were run by very scary looking introjects of our own abusers. For anyone who doesn't know, an introject is an internalized person from outside the system that takes on the characteristics of that person and often takes on the physical image of that person and turns into a full-fledged alter. So it's an alter that looks like and mimics someone from outside the system. Introjects are not always negative. They can be internalizations of positive figures from childhood, but they can also, in the context of programming, be purposefully set up by programmers to be copies of them, to then carry out internal programming. And so that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about copies of my parents, for example, who were very scary to the alters inside who were under their control. So recognizing that these parts were terrorized often by people they thought were their own external programmers, who they thought were watching them all the time through these parts, that was important to understand. So having that compassion set the stage for us to go in and work with these parts. And right now I'm talking about what we do before we go in to deprogram these systems, when we recognize that these parts are there. And this takes a lot of mapping and a lot of strategy to be able to see the presence of the sabotage systems before they come forward to attack, because once they attack, we're greatly diminished in our power over them. But if we're not able to protect ourselves from them first and to work with them indirectly before going into the systems themselves, what we've learned to do is we learn to make sure that we have parts around us so that when we go in, one part or a few parts are targeted by the fog programs and unable to think, but there are other parts around them that are hidden, somehow cloaked, from the sabotagers, who are there to then help the parts who've been fogged. These are typically older protector parts of the system who have more experience with deprogramming than the younger parts who are going in to the system directly. And once these parts see that the younger parts have been fogged, it's their job to keep those parts awake somehow. One of the ways that they've done this is to drug the parts that have been fogged with counter drugs. So if the parts have been fogged using a combination of trance triggers and opiate-like inner drugs, these parts will then dose the fog part with some kind of stimulant that will counteract it, something that will reawaken their ability to think critically and get some energy into them. They may feel a little altered, but it will still enable them to go in and do the deprogramming work. One of the things we've found is that our fog sabotagers, they're often not looking for us. They're not looking to see if parts have failed to be properly fogged. They may look to see if the fogging worked initially, but then they may go back to their other business without really paying attention, not expecting us to have countered it in any way. So it can be very useful to let a part get fogged and then very quickly undo it when the fog programmers aren't looking. They will notice if we mess with the system too much. So once we start really deprogramming the system that they were there to protect the programming of, they may notice. But we will at least buy ourselves some time by catching them by surprise. Another thing we've learned to do is to scramble the access codes of systems that are booby-trapped before we are able to de-booby-trap them. So simply make them inaccessible to the parts that want to access them and reinforce their programming. This will initiate some kind of war, usually, in the system, where those parts start attacking us. The sabotagers start attacking the deprogrammers. We don't like this. What we prefer to do is to go into the sabotage programs directly and deprogram them. This can be extremely difficult because sabotage programs for us are often all linked together, and to trigger one can trigger them all. And they typically have had sacrificial alters, ALTERS, as in dissociative parts. And these parts are often most precious to us. They're inner child parts that they will destroy through splitting programs and re-traumatization within a short instant if we try to deprogram them. And so it's a blackmail technique. They will dismantle one of our core inner child parts if we try to deprogram them directly. This we have techniques for dealing with, but again, this is very difficult, running that risk. So, all this being said, every single one of these different strategies, these are things I've had to work out for myself through trial and error. I've had to figure out how to use these techniques together, and I've had other techniques I've used as well. My video is getting to be about 11 minutes long, so I'm going to stop now. And while I don't think that I've given anyone a comprehensive guide to deprogramming and subverting these programs, I think that to anyone who already has knowledge of themselves and their system and some of how their programming works, I've given plenty of inspiration and ideas that you can then work with yourself, if that description fits you. If not, and you have questions, please feel free to ask in the description. You can also email me. Ask in the comment section. I'm not used to talking. I'm a different part than who usually comes forward in these videos. So you can ask me in the comment section, or if you would rather, you're welcome to email me. I'll put my email in the description below. Thank you.